All right. So what is culture? It's what we care for, guys. It's anything that we do that we really care about a lot. The word cultus is a Latin phrase that means to care for, okay? Even the word agriculture has that word culture in it, and it means to care for the earth in a way that's going to allow it to sustain us through crops or whatnot. Our culture is best described as the things that we care deeply about. That can be, it can be religion. We think about things like religion being a really important part of who we are and our identity, but it's more than just that. It's also values. It's also the objects that we use, from computers to cell phones to, in particular, the Apple iPhone. So there's a lot that we're going to look at with culture. We're going to break it down in a few different ways. The first way we're going to do it is looking at culture as a visible or invisible culture. In other words, material or non-material. Okay. Now, examples of material or visible culture is going to be over here on the left. You got cars, iPhones, PlayStation 4s, the cello, clothing. I mean, a huge list, anything that you can see. It doesn't have to just be items either. Okay. Over this way, you've got things that are a part of who we are in terms of what we believe, or things you can't hold with your hands and see with your eyes. Things like religion, language, values, ideology, right? One important thing that I wanted to point out is that culture is always changing, okay? So both material and non-material culture is always changing. We didn't have iPhones whenever I was in high school. The cars were not nearly as fuel efficient as they were, and maybe not every family had 2 or 3 of them. Depending on where you are, that may be the case. At the same time, the things that we hold as our values have changed over time. Language changes and is always adapting to new words that may be brought into our vocabulary based on new technology or based on new interactions with other cultural groups. So culture is always changing. I wanted to look at a few terms, okay, a few like vocabulary words, because AP Human Geography truly, guys, is a course that's centered on understanding terminology. And I say that, and you guys have heard that, I'm sure, from your teachers and anyone who knows the subject. But y'all, probably 60 or 70% of that test, multiple choice and FRQ, is going to be centered on your understanding and application of terminology. So with that said, one of the words you're going to see right off the bat if you're reading the Rubenstein book is this word habit. What is a habit? Well, a habit can be defined as anything that people are going to do on an individual basis that may not apply to an entire cultural group. All right. So for me, I've got this awesome picture of the Alchemist's Code. It's a little cell phone app, some gotcha game. You spend money on in-game currency, and then it's like a lottery system. You either get a great character or you get a terrible character, and you're able to build them up and things like that, like you would in any JRPG. Now, I'm a video game nerd when it comes to things like this, and I spent a huge amount of time playing this game. But probably most of you don't, if you've ever even heard of it. Some of y'all may not have even heard of this game, right? So this is going to be something that applies to me individually as a habit. Another thing is, I know an individual who wears a kilt, like the Irish kilt, like something you would see somebody playing a bagpipe. This is not something that is, I would say, normal in our culture. So it would be a habit of that individual. Another thing is if someone, might drink a very specific kind of drink all the time, like it's going out of style. For me, that's wild strawberry Crystal Light Energy. I can't help myself when I get around that stuff. It just tastes so good. These are all going to be individual habits or things that help to define who I am as a person, but may not apply to the entire group. In other words, my community in which I live, or even the United States as a whole. A cultural trait is going to be a part of a culture that is better applied to a social group. All right. So maybe a language or a dialect might be a cultural trait. A sport that is played. I'm trying to make that go away. Sorry. maybe a certain sport that's going to be big is part of one's culture. Down here in South Carolina, man, I couldn't tell you the first thing about hockey. I don't think I know a single hockey team. We just don't play hockey. I know that Columbia, the capital of South Carolina, used to have a hockey team called the Inferno. Soda City, also known as famously hot. So it makes sense that the Inferno would be the name of our hockey team, but it didn't really go anywhere. And now the Inferno doesn't play. So hockey is not a big deal around here. It may be a bigger deal further north. All right. Also, education is going to play a role in maybe a part, is probably going to be a part of our culture. It's going to be a cultural trait. Now, when you take all these different intertwining various cultural traits and you put them together and use them kind of to define a culture in broader terms, this is when you're looking at something like a cultural complex. Okay. So for example, if you look at the maps right here on the left, you're seeing a map of the red are those who voted for Trump in 2016. The blue, obviously, your Democrats. There are the blue states, the ones that voted for Hillary Clinton. Over here on the right, you've got a group that's showing the non-religious people in the United States. In other words, the lighter the color, like you see over here in the Bible Belt, the lighter the color, the more religious they're going to be. Okay, so people over here in my state are pretty religious. Same for these, southern states known as the Bible Belt. Well, southern Christian conservatives, we know from studying the election, overwhelmingly voted for Donald Trump. And you see that. Also over here, these states are a little bit less religious. I'm sorry, a little bit more religious as well. So they tended to maybe vote for Trump because in a lot of cases, conservative values correlate with established religion. Now, I'm not saying that it is going to be the case with everyone. I'm not saying you have to be a Christian to be a conservative or vice versa. But what I'm saying is that there is a degree of correlation with that. And so this might be a good example of a cultural complex when you take these traits and put them together. The next term that I wanted to look at is a cultural hearth, which is simply a point of origin. These right here are your cultural hearths, maybe your civilization hearths, early stuff you'll see in any world history textbook or maybe even your AP Human Geography book. Material that is visible culture is anything that can be held, touched, and even seen. Okay, we already talked about cars, tools, toys, clothing, and sports. But even architecture is going to be an example of our material culture or our visible culture. Even the kinds of activities we engage in, from movies to working in office buildings or working in schools or going to school, shopping in supermarkets, going to the movie, I just said that, going to sporting events. These are all examples of one's material culture. All right. You may not be able to hold a football game in your hands, but you can certainly see it. You can see the field. You can hold the football. You can touch the players. All these things are going to make it part of our visible, and that means, in other words, material culture. The non-material or invisible culture is going to be those things you can't see. And we're looking at religion and faith. We're looking at the language you speak. You can tell that I speak English, obviously, but you can't hold my English and you can't hold the identity that goes with that in your hand. And when I say ideology, I'm talking about like, sometimes you hear it in terms of political ideology. All right, you hear somebody talking about what they believe in when it comes to liberalism or conservatism or things like that. And maybe ideology is a little bit deeper than that. We're not going to talk too much about that right now, but we just know that ideology and religion and values all go very, very closely and are going to be part of our non-material or invisible culture. Now, of these two things, people tend to be more passionate about the non-material, the stuff you can't see. Okay, and maybe you're doubting me on this, or maybe not. This right here is something that is still hot in the news now. It happened several years ago when Colin Kaepernick took a knee during the national anthem, and as a way of protesting racial inequalities in our country. And regardless of how you feel about this, the controversy over this issue is a result of someone's attack towards invisible or non-material culture, which is the reason why I'm showing you this. Is, the reason we care so much about this is because it is an attack on the values that we hold dear, or it is upholding values that we hold dear. So it was either taken as an attack or it's taken as he's a hero because he is advocating for equality and equal rights for blacks and people of all different races. It depends on how you see it. Still another example is your recent migrations. Okay. Does anybody know what this one over here on the left is? Anybody know what migration that is? In 2014, you start to see huge coverage of this massive Syrian migration due to the Syrian civil war, which started in 2011. Now, even though the war had been going on for several years, we didn't start to really care about it in the West until we saw images of children washing up on the shores of the Mediterranean because their crowded ships busted and broke while they were crossing the Mediterranean. And still over here, you've got migrants from Honduras and El Salvador who are moving in the thousands, even now, this is in the news right now, to the United States border. Part of the reason why people in Europe and people in the United States, fear migrant into their country or fear having tons of people from different cultures and different groups is because of the possible attack on their non-material or their invisible culture. This is just one of many reasons, but that's the reason why I'm showing it is because in Europe in particular, when we look at the Syrian civil war and the migration caused by that, many of the people moving over this way are Muslims, and you've got a way larger Muslim population starting to be in countries like Germany and the United Kingdom and France. And it's a lot of conservatives are afraid of what that might mean for how those countries are going to be in the future. So just know that these things will play a role. Together, artifacts in conjunction with non-material, when I say artifacts, I mean things you can hold and see and taste and all that good stuff. In conjunction with non-material elements of the culture can tell you a lot about who people are. All right. So if you take computers, for example, or cars or whatever, let's look at computers here. It is a symbol of access to information. It is a symbol of the freedom of pursuing education, as a symbol of good standard of living, of opportunity, of living in an MDC. It's also a symbol of English. A lot of the internet is in English, which makes it more accessible to a lot of the world. Many people in the world speak English as a second language. It also makes, or I guess is associated maybe with the West and with Western entertainment and economics. You use the computer to buy things online, to order stuff from clear across the world. And so in a lot of ways, computer represents way more than just a cool device you can play games on or do schoolwork on or whatever it is that you're trying to use your computer to do.